I believe this was it, and I'm ready to retire and maybe start another company. Forget discomfort. I've got business, not to mention life, figured out. Well, all of a sudden, I can't pay my bills. I can't pay my rent. I'm getting behind on things. My identity, who I thought I was, what success was, what business was, how to interact with people, like those things were so caught up in that company that when the company collapsed, so did I. I go from like peak comfort to the trough of couldn't be experiencing more discomfort. There are 5 main discomforts that stop all of us, and we all deal with all of them, but there's one that rises to the top. Like right now, wherever you are, there is one discomfort that stands out that's in your way.
So I dug into your book, super cool, Hunting Discomfort. I've got it right here, right next to me. And the first thing I do, I'm super weird with this, but I want to understand who you dedicate it to. And I saw that you dedicated this to your grandmother. You had an intro about your grandmother. I'd love to just start before we go into the details and the high performance stuff and how you're going to help everyone understand cool stuff. Tell me a little bit about your grandmother and help me understand that relationship and why she was the first person you wrote about in your book.
Yeah. Well, I think the two things go hand in hand. What I'm about to share, I think, is a necessary component of being a high performer. And I learned it from my grandmother. She was one of the closest people in my life, especially as a kid. And she passed away when I was 13. And she looked into the ultimate unknown. You could even say like the ultimate discomfort, which was her passing, her dying. She had cancer. The last couple of months, we kind of knew it was coming, and how she looked at the unknown and the fact that she was able to open her heart and her mind. And she actually called all of her friends and all of her family and said, "Hey, I'm dying. I just want to say goodbye. Like, these are our last words." The way she confronted that was something that I didn't appreciate at the time, but has since become one of the most moving, important things to me in my life. And if she can look into that ultimate unknown with that kind of courage and that kind of bravery, I certainly can take a small piece of that. I think we all can take a small piece of that, to have the courage to start that new business, to start that new exercise regimen, whatever unknown we're facing. So as I was writing it, there was nobody else I would dedicate it to. It was all her.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite story about her growing up? Anything that stands out outside of the challenge that she met? But when I have an Italian grandmother who passed many years ago now, but to this day, when I talk about my grandmother on my mom's side, I can taste the meatballs and the spaghetti sauce. Like, I actually feel what she cooked. And I remember sitting in the kitchen and just waiting for her to share something with me, or we were making the sauce and she would ask me what ingredients were missing. And until I could figure out what was actually there, she wouldn't stop. She'd say, no, it's not basil. No, it's not salt, but let's try a little bit. And ultimately, what was she teaching me? That the medicine was love. You make the sauce with love. So tell me about your grandmother a little bit, just one story that helps the listeners understand a little bit more about her and your relationship.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, I think it's the moments in life that really matter. I mean, oftentimes we live in generalities of like, I went to school and did this and had these friends, but it's those specific moments, like you said, sitting at the kitchen table, tasting the sauce, looking her in the eye. It's those moments that really make a difference from us. And it's those moments that matter. And this is just a fun one that came to mind is I must have been 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that age range. And she bought a new car and she was retired. And she said, "You know what? I'm going to splurge a little bit. I'm going to get myself a Cadillac Elante, bright red, convertible." And I went to the dealership with her when she got it. And I remember leaving the dealership and she was like very cautious. To give you kind of a sense of who she was, she got some kind of like Plymouth Voyager or something to drive day to day. She didn't even drive this thing after our first drive. She just kept it in the garage. But the first time I get in the car with her, I get to, be on the inaugural ride. And I didn't know what the speedometer worked, how the RPMs worked, any of that. And she was like so focused on the road. She kept saying, like, tell me how fast I'm going. And I was looking at the RPMs. So we're like flying down some side road that's got a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. And I'm like, yeah, you're only going 25 or so, looking at the RPMs. And she's like screaming. And finally she looked down and she's like, there's no way we're going 25. And we're going like 65 or something.
Oh
But
my
it's a
God.
moment I'll never forget with her. It was a blast. It was a
Well,
blast being in
it
that
kind of
car.
shows how much she trusted you. I mean,
Yeah.
when you, it's like when your mom or dad would like say, "Hey, just hold the wheel." And back in
Right.
the old days, you'd be holding the wheel and they're driving. You're like, I don't know that I should be doing this.
Right.
Um,
Like I'm highly unqualified. I don't know. I don't even know what gauge I'm looking at, like I'm not the guy for this, but yeah, you're right. She did. She trusted a lot. And to your point, she loved a lot too. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that when you look at the people that matter most in our life and you really establish the who's that matter most,
yeah.
it starts to become easy to fall in love with some of the daily activities. The mundane stuff that you take for granted is often the stuff that we miss.
Yeah.
And I miss sitting at the kitchen table having that spaghetti sauce and having my grandmother ask me if I want more and me knowing that I don't need any more and then saying, yeah, just a little, and then piling it on and me going, I'm never going to be able to finish this.
Yeah.
And, but just having the conversation and remembering what that felt like and how they made us feel, which was really creating the, the parameters to live in the world we live in today. If we talk about hunting discomfort, I want you to kind of go into what that means to you and kind of what brought you to that title, that journey. But I kind of feel like the people we love kind of
Yeah.
prepared us for that by believing in us. And I would imagine you feel similar.
Yeah, there's no question. Um, so it's funny because the biggest feedback I get from hunting discomfort, whether they're talking about my new book or when I'm talking about it on the stage, at least when they're looking at it as kind of a superficial level, is Sterling, you got to look at my business, my bank account, my relationships, my life. Like I don't need to hunt discomfort. I'm surrounded by it. And I get it
Yes.
because we live in a crazy, uncertain, uncomfortable world with tech disruption, global uncertainty, inflation. We're dealing with all these unknown and all this uncomfortable things out around us. So I get it. But at the same time, my answer is always the same, which is, oh, you are living with discomfort, not hunting it. Because when you're hunting discomfort, you are forever and ultimately free of it. Not circumstantially free, not when you have enough money in your bank account or you're married to the right person or you have the right team, but you are free, period. And I'll tell you, Scott, I learned that the hard way. You know, I don't think anybody comes out of the womb like ready to hunt discomfort. I certainly didn't. And I lived a lot of my life in a relatively comfortable state and started a tech company with my dad out of my family's grocery store in upstate New York. And I'd love to tell you, like, we had the whole strategy and growth plan and all those things, and we did that stuff. But admittedly, we had to have gotten at least a little bit lucky to sell it to this group in Silicon Valley where it became the Apple Pay before Apple Pay.
Awesome.
It's a little fingerprint sensor sat next to the credit card terminal. And after you enrolled, you put your finger down, your credit cards come up, loyalty cards, just like Apple Pay, just no phone. And I ride this thing out to a point where we raise over $550 million US dollars, multi-billion-dollar valuation, 700 employees, offices all over the world. Have you seen that movie, The Wolf of Wall Street?
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
It was like a scene out of that movie. I'm watching that movie like, oh yeah, that looks somewhat familiar. And I knew it was just a matter of time until we take this thing public. I'd cash in, we'd all cash in, maybe buy an island or a private jet, and I'd crown myself the next Steve Jobs.
Give
That's
me an
not what the
age.
book
Give
is
me an
about.
age. Like paint the picture of the age exactly that you're at right now.
So we sold the company when I was 22.
Okay. That helps
22.
the listeners really feel. I mean, we all know where we were at 22 and what we kind of thought the world would look like and if we could
Right
have
out of
anything.
college.
Okay.
Yeah. And when I say like I knew, it was like there was no other choice. Like I believe this was it, and I'm ready to retire and maybe start another company. Forget discomfort. I've got business, not to mention life, figured out. and
pure comfort now.
pure comfort. Exactly. And all went really, really well through all this growth. It was exciting. I worked a ton and I had the penthouse apartment and the girlfriend and the bank account and all the things until the housing market collapsed and our investment dried up. And we didn't have enough organic growth to sustain the size and level of company we had built. So when we couldn't raise any more money, the entire thing collapsed. $500 million gone. Right.
Man.
And I don't know if it was because of my age or my inexperience or just because there's some natural human tendencies here, but my identity, who I thought I was, what success was, what business was, how to interact with people, like those things were so caught up in that company that when the company collapsed, so did I. So I go from like peak comfort to the trough of couldn't be experiencing more discomfort. And I went through what I now call the discomfort defaults, ineffective ways of dealing with discomfort that hold us back, avoiding, denying, and surviving. Avoiding as in, I know there's some difficult conversations I need to have, and I'm going to put them off as long as I can, right? Everybody's done that, I think, in some shape or form. Denying, I can't tell you, Scott, how many reports we looked at as the company was coming to an end, as my bank account's declining, that said some version of, oh, yeah, everything's going to be okay, when clearly it wasn't, right? Denying the reality, the uncomfortable reality that was, and surviving. I think this one's the worst, at least was for me.
Is it like a blind optimism though, was the last one, right? It's like
right.
You're almost, you believe in
Yeah.
what you've been doing so much that in some ways you're kind of, you don't want to face it. You're denying it, but you're blindly just optimistic. Like it's all going to be fine. It'll be fine.
Right. Right. Yeah. You're denying the realities at hand. And somewhere in there, you might even be drinking some of your worries away or overworking. You're going to look for comfort somewhere. And I found it mostly in working 20 hours a day and a couple of drinks when I got to the end of it. Right. I didn't want to feel those feelings or confront what I needed to confront. And it's worse with surviving, where on the surface, you keep everything like it's fine, but underneath things are starting to fall apart. So on the surface, especially as the company was done and I don't have any income, well, all of a sudden I can't pay my bills. I can't pay my rent. I'm getting behind on things. And my millionaire friends are calling me saying, hey, come on these trips, come out to these fancy dinners. And for a while, Scott, I was.
Right.
Until I literally was in all sorts of debt. I didn't have the cash for anything. And they would still call me. But what I would say was I'm busy. I didn't say I need help. I didn't say I'm in this difficult position. I said I'm busy. And what I meant was I'm busy just trying to survive and not telling anybody that I need help.
Man. So where we are now at our ages today, the funniest part about that is that you're surrounded by all these people that are hyper successful, just like you have, regardless of the age. But the room is usually so valuable. What do you do differently looking back? I know that a lot of us in our stories, we don't want to go back. We don't regret anything because it's brought us to where we are today. Like we are exactly where we're supposed to be. But if you were looking back, what are the things, and I think that's where a lot of the process comes from. What are the things that you would do differently if you're 22, your Wolf of Wall Street life is coming to an end, and your friends are still having a great time and nobody knows that you're suffering? What are some things that you would do differently today?
Well, the thing with those discomfort defaults, avoiding, denying, and surviving, is that they kind of work like a governor on a car, right? No matter how much more you work, even to some extent, how much more money you throw at it, you just can't go any faster. You just can't produce any new breakthrough results. And that's where a lot of people are. I found this Norwegian study that found that those ineffective ways of dealing with discomfort leaves people unable, not unwilling, but unable to act in accordance with the knowledge that they already had. Or like very simply, I knew I needed money. I knew I needed a job, but discomfort stopped me, right? So discomfort is the defining factor. It's the X factor that'll lead to success or anything else.
Man.
And what I found is, you know, I end up playing this sad country song of a story out where I go from the penthouse to my parents' house. I'm in 6 figures of debt. My girlfriend breaks up with me. And it's hard to overstate how difficult those months were. In some degree, those years were. But what I learned in that moment that I think I do much differently now is that I understand discomfort. I reframe discomfort as an opportunity versus something to avoid. Whenever you feel those feelings of discomfort, embarrassment, fear, anger, grief, when you feel those feelings, it's like a neon sign for me now. And, we get into it in the book, we'll get into it here, that here's where some new opportunity is. It's telling you, here's the unknown, here's the potential, here's something that maybe you're uncomfortable with, but it's through these things that you're going to achieve some breakthrough results. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And I love applying a formula to something that was such a deep failure in your brain. Wasn't a failure at all, because it created something much bigger than what you ever could have done with not having really built it the way that you're building this now. Like,
No question.
being 22, we don't know anything, right? When it comes too easy, it goes away way too quick. Most of the time, most people, that's why NFL players, major league sports of any kind, they often work heavily, make good money for 3 years, and then they're broke if they don't create something bigger than themselves and kind of go through the process of identifying each of the new challenges that present themselves, and then the opportunity that they turn it into.
Yeah, lottery winners too. As part of the research for the book, I found something like 85-90% of lottery winners, no matter how much money they get, end up somewhere about where they were financially. And it's like, well, how is that? And what it comes down to is that unless you're shifting your underlying beliefs, you're willing to view a new reality. Not that you're wrong about how you're seeing the world, but unless you're willing to see some of those things newly or differently, or in addition to, about one of three things: either yourself, how you see yourself, your personality, who you are, your purpose in the world; others, individual others, like your mom, your business partner, your significant other; or groups of others, my company, my team. And then finally, the third category of beliefs that you have are around the world and how the world works. And unless you shift some of those things, which inevitably will be uncomfortable, you're going to settle back in, no matter what happens with the world, in about the same place that you started.
Yep. From victim to victor is so crucial, right? I mean, and it's very easy to become the victim. It's very easy to have that story and then harp on the story of what you were, what you had, how it was, versus what you're doing, how you've changed, how you've grown, where you're going. I had a conversation this past weekend. I run a big wine festival. We had about 8,000 people out there for charity. It's an amazing event.
I missed my invite to that, Scott.
You're now that we're friends, now that we're growing together, you're invited, man. We're gonna do
right on. I'm there.
We're gonna do something super cool next year. But I'm really excited. At the end of the event, there's always like a couple of really good, deep conversations. You've had a couple glasses of wine. Now, in running it, I don't get to have as much fun as I'd like, but in talking to a couple of the young people that were working, we have a chalet, a private chalet, which is like a tent, and it's a business area, and we had hundreds of people in there with all of our friends and family. And it's the end of the night. I'm talking to some young people, and they're really talking about what they want out of they're talking about what their relationships are and where they're at right now. And I ask them a simple question. I'm like, well, where do you want to be? And they can't define where they want to be. All they're focused on is what everyone else around them isn't providing to them, right? Like, oh, my boyfriend doesn't want to get married. My job isn't the right job. And the response when you're thinking about that is, okay, what opportunities exist in that situation that take you out of being I'm getting so excited. I'm knocking my mic around here. What opportunities take you out of being the victim to really becoming victorious in that? And with your formula, what are some things that you would recommend to that same question, that same conversation? And sometimes it's high performers. It's people that are 45, 55 years old. They've been doing the same thing their whole lives. They still haven't figured out where they're going versus just going through the motions that have always worked for them?
Yeah. Well, growth is a mountain without a top, right? I work with people that are just starting companies. I'm working with people that have founded, taken companies public and, have all the money in the world. Like growth doesn't stop until we're in the ground. And one of the things that I think differentiates the 99.9% of people versus the, let's call it 0.1 that have real breakthrough results is how to what we were just talking about is how they envision that future. And most people look at the future and they say, well, I wish, I hope I could. I'll try, I might, or even this is my favorite one. I can't possibly retire when I'm 40 years old, things like that. Or I want $1 million in the bank, or I wish I was healthier. Right. And it's easy to live in that world. It doesn't take anything. There's no cost. We can just use words as cheaply as they come and say, well, yeah, I want that. I wish for that. The people that make a real impact, they live in another world that all of us know, but only the brave few step into. And they live in a world that's courageous enough to stare into the unknown of tomorrow. Tomorrow is unknown. As oftentimes as we get up every day and we think like, it'll be about like yesterday. Tomorrow is the epitome of the unknown. They look into that, they gaze into that, and they say this incredibly simple but profound phrase: I will. They live in a world of no matter what, right? They take the chaos of potential in the unknown and they will it into breakthrough results. And I think that's critical for anybody. Once you meet that discomfort, or better said, at least in our conversation here, once you hunt that discomfort,
Yeah.
you have to will something through to the other side of it. And that commitment, you've got to find a way to make a commitment to yourself, to others, with money, with purpose, that is bigger than your discomfort. And when you can do that in small ways or in massive ways, that's what's going to push you through to new results.
Yeah. I love the word commitment because I think it's the one word that most people cannot get past when it comes to actually achieving something great. And a
Yeah.
lot of times what happens is you have to be committed to the really boring stuff. Waking up, going to work, doing the same mundane things every day, but
Yeah.
incrementally getting better at them over and over and over again.
Yep.
And then finding more discomfort in each day. If you're growing and learning from that experience, sometimes that's the worst part of actually doing something great, is that every day is not going to be big and great. Some days it's just going to be something that you've got to get through and build that habit. How do you do that in your own life? How do you build the right habits in your life to make sure that you're hunting discomfort for our conversation here, but you're really
Yeah.
living your life with will, not with want?
Yeah. Well, commitment, I think about it as like getting a tattoo, and that's what I call it. It's not a physical tattoo. Like, I'm not suggesting you go out and get inked, but you commit in a way where there was no going back. And we've got folks from the No Matter What community. Emmanuel, for example, he lost his job early in the pandemic. And he's living outside of New York City, brand new wife. Like this, when he lost his job, it's the epitome of discomfort, right? Like he's
Right.
thrown in the unknown in a similar way to I was. And this guy went out and he didn't just get like a proverbial tattoo. He actually went out and got the name of the business he wanted to start on his, I think it's his right bicep, and not like a little thing, like it's his entire bicep. How he explained that to his
And
wife
he
when he
must have a big bicep. Like, nobody with
Yep.
small biceps gets a
Right,
tattoo on their
exactly,
bicep. Let's
exactly.
be
Yeah, and
honest here.
he's always showing it off,
Okay,
flexing,
yeah,
it's the
yeah,
whole thing.
got it.
And I don't know what he said to his wife when he got home, but he used that commitment when everything's got hard, right? As he's watching his bank account go down, he's not getting the results that he wants, doesn't have any clients as he wants, as he's growing this marketing organization. He just keeps coming back to his commitment. And for him, it was really easy. You just had to look down. It's on his bicep. Today, because of that commitment, he's got now, and he just texted me a couple of months ago, an 8-figure company on his hands
That's awesome.
because of that commitment. Now, to get back to your question, like, how do you build habits that are going to call you through that discomfort, right? How do you live true to that commitment and make
Right.
sure you're going after it? It comes down to the people that you're surrounded by. And this I call building a street gang.
Yeah.
It's not like a personal board of directors. It's not drinking buddies. It's not your best friend. Well, could be. But what's important in it is people that are going to go toe to toe with you and hold you accountable to what you said you were going to do. And look at your life, look at your day, look at your schedule, look at the things you're doing and say, here's where we can adjust. Here's where we can make it better. This looks like a discomfort that you're avoiding.
Yeah.
Oftentimes I hear with high performers, a lot of entrepreneurs, especially early stage ones, are afraid to ask for the deal, to actually make the request to say, will you send me that money in exchange for my products or services, right?
Yep.
That's a really early discomfort that I think many people have, that when you're surrounded by that street gang, people holding you true to what you said are going to be able to call you on. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. When you have that street gang,
Yeah.
it's you could be unstoppable, but if you're thinking bigger than everybody in your gang, you're in the wrong room. Like, one of the key components I would imagine of that gang is that accountability that you're talking about, so that people are helping you to raise the level. They're showing you, you're talking about bringing it up and saying, hey, I'm challenged in this environment, or I didn't ask for the order, and you're a buddy and you're saying, hey, dude, you got to ask for that order. You got to go in and actually say, I can help you, and here's how I can help you, and I know I can help you. And that
absolutely.
fear of failure doesn't happen. It's so much more accepted when you're not in the right street gang.
Totally. But a misstep that I see a lot of people make is, oh, I don't have the right street gang. I don't have the right people around me, so I'm just not going to do any of it yet. And that is not the right approach, right? It's a pitfall. I don't care who's around you. Like, go to your roommate, your best friend, your significant other, like, find somebody that's going to really hold you accountable, and don't just do it generically. Like, oh, I need to hold you accountable. I want this deliverable on this day, and I want to meet you at this time, and I want you to ask me about it. Right? You don't
Yep.
need a whole bunch of training. You don't need to necessarily be a high performer yourself. Like, most people can do that. So yes,
point.
I'm all for, up leveling the room that you're in, surrounding yourself with higher performing people, but not as an excuse for not holding yourself accountable or finding people to hold yourself accountable. Just ask those folks around you. Say, hey, listen, I need a street gang. I need you to hold me accountable. And you don't have to make it weird. You can just tell them Sterling sent you.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I'm looking for a new gang, and I've got to actually find people that want to do big shit with me. And I want you to be in the room with me. So, or hold me accountable at the very least, just somebody.
Yeah. Now, turns out the research behind this is, when you've got somebody holding you accountable like that, you're 95% more likely to achieve your goal. Not 80%, not 85, not 90, 95%. Like, if you truly want whatever it is that you say you want to achieve, find someone to hold you accountable. And as a team, teams that do this and hold each other accountable, and I mean team in the broadest sense, could be team your family, could be team a community group, could be a division of your company, could be the team of your company itself. They achieve results almost 4 times people that don't hold themselves accountable. It's like, either you have a real intentional, inspired, no matter what culture, or you've got kind of a default doesn't matter culture. There's no in between.
Yeah, it's so true. Tell me the no matter what culture. I mean, you mentioned that a lot. It's right behind you in the video here. I love it. I love the concept. So just give our listeners a little intro into what that is outside of the definition you just gave.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple components that are really important for all of us every single day. And the first we harped on a lot, which is accountability. There's one thing every single day that myself and everybody on our team will do, no matter what. And it doesn't have to be big. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm going to call my mom. I haven't talked to her in a week. I'm going to call her no matter what. Or I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to meditate, or it could be, I'm going to make 10 new sales calls today. Like, I don't care what it is, but commit to one thing every day and do it no matter what. So that's one piece. The second piece.
Before you go to the second piece, I want to know, what is your one no matter what? What is yours personally?
Today, it's different every day, right?
Okay.
You could change it. It could be the same, but for me today, it was meditating. I've gotten out of the practice a little bit. So today I'm meditating for 15 minutes, no matter what.
It's
already have, by the way.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Now go to number two. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to
Yeah, no,
understand that.
all good. So the second piece, and I think this is undervalued a lot, especially amongst groups that are, quote unquote high performing, which is love, like love and acceptance. When you're going through discomfort, you're going through failures, you're going through the unknown. Sometimes you lose track of where you are and sometimes who you are, like what happened to me when that company fell apart. And you need somebody outside of yourself to kind of give you that love and acceptance, not romantic love,
Right.
but like acceptance love, right? Like I love you as a human being, no
No
matter
matter
what.
what. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so we make sure that we're talking about on a regular basis, like where we're falling down, where we're feeling lost. And then the others in that group can acknowledge that person and kind of reorient them to, oh, yeah, I am the kind of person that can do these things regardless of the circumstances. Right. I lost my way and maybe I'm still not sure, but I'm going to use your love, your acceptance of me as a foothold to take that next step.
Yeah, it just goes to show you the power of belief in somebody. Like, if
Yeah.
you are somebody else's no matter what, that you love them like that, that you're gonna help them become something bigger than themselves, it's
Yeah.
so powerful because that is it's a needed component to that level of commitment and acceptance.
Yeah, and what you're doing, back to what we're talking about in the beginning, as you're going through this, you're literally shifting your beliefs, right? Like, I don't believe I can do it, but you believe that I can. So I'm going to leverage your belief until I can cultivate that inside of myself.
Yeah.
That's what that's about.
Well, and some people are really blessed to have families that provide this for them.
Yeah.
And I've got a mother and a father, I think, that believed in me no matter what. My
Yeah.
mom, I could call tomorrow and say, "Hey, everything's gone, and all the great things I've been able to do in my life, I can't do any of them right now." And she'd have a meal ready for me, a big
Yeah.
hug when I walk in, and it's good enough. Everything's good enough.
Yeah.
Now she'd also say, "Now get back out there and go do it again."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
some people don't have that, and what you're doing is you're taking away their excuse. You're
Right.
basically saying, find someone that believes in you no matter what. Find somebody that's going to hold you accountable and accept you. And I think I hear you
Yeah.
saying also that the acceptance word sometimes is forgiveness. Sometimes we have to have not only forgiveness for someone that we're helping reach a goal, but forgiveness
Yeah.
within ourselves if we
Yeah.
haven't hit it as quick, or we're not moving. There's so much involved in that aspect. And I think when we
Yeah.
fail, sometimes we lose a little bit. You have to almost go back and remember that acceptance is maybe personal, external and internal. Would you say that that makes sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think internal especially, and we can leverage the external to get there. Not to jump ahead of ourselves, but a really important component of hunting discomfort is surrendering to it. It's actually the last step. And I mean that in terms of accepting everything exactly as it is and exactly as it's not, right? And it's not surrender, give up, sit on
Right.
the couch and watch Netflix. Although, trust me, I've been there. There's a time and a place for that. Carl Jung, arguably the father of modern psychology, right? Many people know. He said we cannot change anything until we accept it. So condemnation about ourselves, our personality, that failure, not being the right age, not having the right time, not having the right team, not being in the right place, right? Like condemnation about any of those things does not liberate. It actually oppresses and makes it very hard,
Right.
maybe impossible to do anything else. So internal surrendering to what is or acceptance what is, I think is the long game. It's again a mountain with no top. We're always going to be building and growing what we can accept and how we can accept it. But to what we're saying here, Scott, you can work with other people that help you get there, help you get through some of those moments where you're really down on yourself or you're mad about something, right? To get you through that, to come back to that acceptance and that belief to keep going forward.
Yeah, and the self-awareness to know you need it. I mean, I
Yeah.
think sometimes we have to have that self-awareness to actually know that we're not in the place that we need to be. And maybe the conversation, the community, the no matter what person, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
it's challenging sometimes, especially when everything's working. So there's a lot of talk about when we fail, what we do, but when everything's working and it's all great and you have those failures, it's almost like a practice you have to go back to and remember, hey, I got to step back and be aware enough to go back and really provide that level of reboot, reset.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's why that streaking or that culture you're developing is so important because as an individual, like I know we all get up in the morning and we see the same bedroom and the same bathroom and the same people more or less, right? Um, but that doesn't mean that we see everything,
Right.
right? Those other people help kind of frame us and adjust us and say, yeah, great, fantastic here, but you could really be moving up here. And another important piece, just to come back to our conversation about the no
Sure.
matter what culture, is the mentorship of somebody that's achieved what it is you want to achieve that can show you literally the pathway tactically how to get there and maybe even put you in touch with some people. And just as a caveat here, I'm not just talking about money and time better spent and business growth, although that is certainly included. I'm also talking about maybe growing your joy and happiness or your spirituality, right? Somebody, a mentor in those areas that has those ways of being that you want or has achieved what you want that can kind of guide you on your pathway. So every single person in our organization and the companies we work with have some kind of individual mentorship that they can look to as a tactical path forward.
Yeah, mentorship I love because I look back and I always had mentors, but I think when you're the kind of person that will do anything, you look at everybody as equal to some extent, right? And
Yep.
mentorship can sometimes be challenging because it feels like you're weakening your mindset. And when you sacrifice and give into that,
Yeah.
it's amazing how the cheat codes become so much easier. I had a couple people I used to work with and consult with, and they were I was the opposite. I did it all. I had to do it myself. I had to figure it out. I was afraid
Mm.
to ask for help,
Yep.
for the
I've
first
been there.
5 to 7 years of my career.
Mm.
And then I start training these younger guys, and everything I said to do, they did. And they were doing everything I did in half the time. And you look back and you say, look, mentorship is the way to 10 times everything you can do on your own if you're strong enough. And I
Yeah.
love it. I love the ability to sacrifice just a little bit of who you are. That ego needs to get out of the way, and we need to learn from other people. It's such a powerful influence.
Yeah, and I think it's especially dangerous these days because there's so much information out there available, right? Like all this positive thinking and growth mindset. And anybody that's been on Instagram for more than a day, like can probably parrot many of these things and they know them intellectually, right? Intellectually, growth is not a difficult thing to get your hands around. It's something like go through the discomfort and learn and grow from whatever it is that you achieve.
Yeah.
But doing it, right? Actually going through the steps is entirely something else. And as you go through the steps, like you're a player in the game, you're not in the stand saying, hey, do that differently. You should have made that pass, right? You're the one doing those things. And that's where real growth is. And you start to embody some of those things versus just know about them.
Yeah, Nike didn't write "Just try it" or "Just know it" on their tagline. They literally
Right.
created one of the greatest, taglines of all time is "Just do it." And so much of the culture today, so many of the people on Instagram, on all these things are out there telling people how to do something they've never actually done in their own lives. And so what you have to do is once you start doing it, you can identify who is doing it, who's just
Right.
talking about it, who's just trying it, what are the keywords or buzzwords that actually matter to
Right.
help us get where we want to get versus being in that loop of just watching and reading and thinking and man, just do something. Cause once you do, you'll really find it's so much more uplifting and it takes you to where you want to go.
Right. And, just a personal example here is I went through something similar that you did, Scott. When I started my keynote speaking career, I was like, I got this thing figured out. Here's my structure. Here's how I'm going to sell it. Here's the value we're delivering. Here's how we're going to measure impact, right? Like, I already know. Right. But when you give up that idea, and I did, I found people in the speaking space that are massively more successful in it than I am. And I went to them and I said, listen, like, help me, you know, uh, however you want to do this. I'm happy to pay you something or, give you a testimonial or support you in some way. And, I've got several, I've worked with them in different ways, but it really took some humility going through that discomfort of it, right? To let go of the ego to be able to do that. And similar to you, we've doubled our business every year ever since we've done that.
Yeah, I think it really is kind of killing the ego. It's also allowing yourself it I think to some extent it's that I can do anything, I don't need anyone mentality is
Yeah.
very, very valuable when you needed it to get out of something in childhood, or you had to battle through a traumatic experience or a
Yeah.
major struggle in your life. It's almost like this innate feeling that we have, and it becomes at a certain point in time, it goes from being empowering to being a complete crutch. And it was never really empowering at all. It was just the thought of guiding you through something that you couldn't get anybody else to help you with at the time. You needed internal existence. But
Yeah.
I look at that and I look back, and the speaking thing's super cool because I'm in a group called Genius Network with Joe Polish, and Joel Weldon is one of the greatest speakers in the last like 50 years. The guy's unbelievable. I think he's almost 80 or just turned 80. And I hired him a couple of months ago, and he was like, "Scott, you're really good and you're doing all these great things. Why did you hire me?" And I
Yeah.
said, "Because I'm not professional at the level that I need to be at. And I need someone who has the experience and wisdom to tell me the
Yeah.
little things that I need to break and fix now so that I can become better. I don't want someone that just says, 'Oh, you're standing in front of the room,' which already makes you better than 80% of the people who are petrified to stand in front of that room.
Yeah.
Let's find someone who will break it down and make every speech, every presentation, every conversation better."
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to get into the speaking thing in a second, but just to round out that no matter what
Sure.
culture, the fourth piece of it is having some inspiration, right? I think just white knuckling some kind of process or system or determination will only get you so far, and it's just unsustainable. You need some kind of inspiration, some purpose, some why, and I don't care what it is or where it comes from, but something, as we were talking about before we got in here, Scott, something bigger than
And
yourself
yourself.
that
Yep.
you can live true to. And not just again in the intellectual sense of, oh, I'm inspired by such and such, but in the true sense of, when I watch this, when I talk to this person, when I meditate, when I walk outside, connects you to the human experience of inspiration. And that's the important component. Can I get into speaking a little bit, or?
Yeah, let me say one thing on the
Yeah.
the part that you're talking about here, because I think it's probably one of the emptiest parts of people's life is the inspiration. So
Mm.
I break life down into four categories: love, impact, faith, and energy. And
Yeah.
for me, faith is God. For other people, it might be connecting with nature, it might be a spirituality, it's something bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
But so often you talk to someone who has so many of the boxes of their life figured out,
Yeah.
but they haven't found an inspiration of a why that's bigger than them. And it's really the missing link, and it's the one that people are afraid to look at. It's the one that people are afraid to believe in. Like, how can something else, someone else give me any more power than I have right now? And
Right.
yet it's the sacrifice that provides them the ability to be the best version of themselves once they give it up. And
Right.
I love that. I love the inspiration point. I love the way you break it down. And I think that connection is crucial.
Yeah. Well, German American philosopher and theologian Paul Tillich talks about two types of human concerns. And concerns, he's talking about like things that human beings deal with. And the first one takes almost all of our time, all of our effort, and all of our resources, which he calls our finite goals, finite concerns, right? And these are the specific things that actually happen in reality, right? I want to get married. I want to have a kid. I want to start this business. I want to start this division. I need to make this much money. I need to open up these many locations, right? Finite goals.
Yep.
Those things are really important. Like, they're critical steps on the ladder of growth. But one of the things that I've learned really from the no matter what community is those things aren't what matter at the end of the day. And it's not what matters at the end of our life. And I can say that as somebody that's considered getting there a little bit early. The second thing that humans are concerned with, Paul Tillich says, is infinite concerns or ultimate concerns, things that somewhat ironically, no matter what happens in the world, no matter what happens around you, cannot be taken away from you. Things like love, joy, peace, gratitude, right? Those things I would put under the umbrella of inspiration. And when we connect with those things, it transforms any discomfort, any finite goals that are in our way. And that's where the breakthrough results come from.
That's huge. Yeah. You know, they're the eulogy virtues. I've heard it referred to. And when you pass on, I've
Mm,
delivered 4 eulogies for my 4 grandparents.
wow.
And I always say I've never been one to build something with my hands, and I don't have lots of talents or traits, but I honor people by utilizing the gifts that I've been given, which is
Mm,
communication, the ability to talk and understand and connect with people.
beautiful.
And giving those eulogies has given me perspective on something that I never understood prior. And that is, not once did I talk about their jobs every
Mm,
day or the finite things. I talked about how much joy they brought to people, what their life was all about, who they loved, who loved
right.
them back,
Yeah.
the generations that they created. You know, it's just absolutely amazing to stand up and honor someone and to think through the process of what are you going to say?
Yeah.
And you know, it's sort of like it's like anytime you honor someone, a best man, a maid of honor speech,
Mm,
anytime you're doing that about someone, you're really telling more about who they are, what they stand for, why they lived, not not the other things that everybody focuses all our time and energy on. And that infinite peace is crucial.
right. And that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. Um, we just need those things in our life. I think we crave them at a very human level. And oftentimes, just because we're talking about eulogies here and we opened up
Yeah,
with my grandmother, we don't really start to connect to those things for ourselves until we've got some kind of death sentence. And we're diagnosed with cancer, or, something happens to us where we can literally see the end, not intellectually again,
right, right.
but you're viscerally having to come to terms with something. And it's oftentimes people only come to terms with what they want their life to be about or what they thought it was about when it's too late, when you already see the end coming. And I think what we've got here is an opportunity to go through some of those things now, whether it's a thought exercise, a heart exercise, a journaling exercise. Like, I don't care how you think about it, but I think we all have a purpose in our life, something bigger than ourselves that, and maybe the reason we're here. And if you wait to wrestle with that until, the end's coming, it's too late. We
Yeah,
can
yeah.
wrestle with that right now and say, well, what is my life about? Why am I here? Why am I living? And it's not to make $1 million, and it's not to, open up this many locations. It's, to your point, it's those human concerns, love, joy, gratitude. It's those things that matter. And as we can not just connect to, but start to distill and understand, what is that for me? And then that's going to make whatever you're doing and wherever you're going and whoever you're working with entirely different and easier, more open. And yeah,
Truth. It's absolute truth. Listen, acknowledging you're going to die is the first step. We're all going to die. And at some point in time, when you acknowledge it and you feel it and you actually think about it a little bit, but you
yeah,
provide a level of positivity to the thought, it may
yeah,
not be the most positive thought in the world, but acknowledging and embracing it makes you understand that there's not infinite levels of time. There's only a finite, to use those 2 words again, there's only a finite amount, a small, limited amount that we're here. And
yeah.
so if we think about those gifts we've been given and we focus on the gratitude you mentioned, you talk a lot about gratitude in your book. You talk a lot about thankfulness in your book. I love those topics
Mm,
because to me, anytime you feel like shit in a day, anytime something's not going your way, I call it the habit of daily impact. Like
mm,
if you just go do something for somebody else, take an act of kindness, the smallest gesture, it immediately starts to build something in you that takes you away from the problem and
Yeah.
into something that's giving you good feeling, good joy, good level of perspective of what you're dealing with. And I couldn't agree more with what you just talked about. I mean, the fact that we have to not only acknowledge it, and if you've had it done for you, meaning that you had a cancer diagnosis or you had something that really scared you, life can change quickly. Hopefully, you don't just know it. You don't just try it. You actually do it, like we also talked about earlier. Those things can really make an impact. Now, I want to transition us to speaking because
Yeah.
you said you had a good story, a good point to talk about there. And as someone with great levels of energy and ADHD,
Yeah.
I always know where I've been. I don't always. I can go anywhere, and I like that. So there's no real process here, but
Yeah.
bring
Oh,
me back
good.
to speaking, brother.
Yeah, well, it actually picks up right there with our life is finite, and having lost what I lost, and my whole identity and ego and everything tied up into that company, I did have some really serious thoughts about maybe I don't want to be here anymore, and I was all hopped up on anxiety medication and antidepressant pills, really thinking like I I felt like, Scott, I screwed up my life. Like that was my shot. I ruined it. I'm done here. Better luck next time if you believe in that. And my mom said this thing when I was a kid, and it came back to me during this dark time. She said, "The way out is through." It's actually Robert Frost, but to me, like whenever I hear it, it's like my mom's voice,
Right.
And it meant to me, um, go through the things you're fearful of, you're embarrassed of, you're scared about, and what you're looking for is on the other side. And I didn't know how, I didn't know what, but I was like committed to this. This is actually where no matter what came from, right? Like I am going to take steps through whatever it is, no matter what. It wasn't a movement. People weren't wearing us t-shirts. It was like, Sterling, I'm going to get out of bed tomorrow, no matter what. I'm going to call my creditors, no matter what. That unsexy stuff that I
Yep.
had to do, but wasn't comfortable doing, didn't want to confront. I said, I'm going to do it no matter what. Now, I don't suggest this at like a doctor level, but I set all my pills aside one day and I said, okay, the thing that scares me most is public speaking. I'd rather be in the coffin than giving the eulogy any day of the week. Um, I was afraid that I'd be up on a stage or even talking to somebody like you, Scott, on a one-on-one basis, and they would see the inadequacy that I thought I was.
Mm.
I thought I was going to be outed as a failure, and I wasn't enough. So speaking is what scared me most. And I don't know if like that the heavens opened up or the clouds parted, right? Like it's hard to remember exactly how it happened, but my email dings as I'm having this thought of the way out is through, and it's this conference in Singapore. And it wasn't to me. It was just a junk mail that I'm sure thousands, if not tens of thousands of people received. And I hit reply and said, "Why don't you have me speak? Best Sterling." And I end up getting on the phone with the conference. Well, we traded emails and I get on the phone with him. And I think it must have been because it was like a game. I had nothing to lose. I've got all this debt, living in my parents' house. I
Yeah.
talk him in to not speaking at his conference, but being the keynote speaker of this event in Singapore. And it didn't become real to me until he sent me the legal agreement. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're a huge failure. You don't know what you're going to talk about, and you're terrified to do it. What are you doing? And I did just what we talked about. I got a tattoo. I committed in a way where there was no going back. And I signed that agreement and sent it back to him before that self-doubt could take me out of the game. And I practiced like you would not believe, hundreds, thousands of times. My poor sister, she was right out of Georgetown grad at the time. And I called her up and I'm like, can you help me? She was my streaking.
Yep.
She became somebody that started to hold me accountable day in and day out to practice, to give me feedback. I bet you she could give you that presentation verbatim. She listened to it so many times.
That's awesome.
And I told her, listen, I'll give you some of the money. You can come with me. She goes, you're an idiot, Sterling. We're in this thing together, right? So we go to Singapore. I'm having heart palpitations. I can't eat for like weeks ahead of time. I can't sleep. I am terrified of terrified. And I get up on the stage and I don't remember exactly how it went. I think I blacked out. So it's a good thing I practiced, had a little bit of like muscle memory there,
Yeah. Yeah. You got to.
And I
The
got off
Michael, the
this
Michael Phelps in the Olympics, just swimming with
right.
no goggles. That was you.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
just do it. Um, and I get off the stage and I thought I bombed. I really did. Like, I'm covering my eyes. I just want to get out of there. I want to like chalk up another failure to my name and um hopefully not have to pay them the money back. I failed so badly, you know? And the conference director makes a beeline for me. And he goes, Sterling, that's the best talk I've seen in my 17 years of doing this. Insane. And to this day, I don't think he was in the same talk that I gave. I think he just wanted to like say something nice to me as the foreigner that came there to speak.
Right.
But he did put me in touch with all of his conference director friends, and it was the beginning, the seed of the business that I have today. And I was like, man, my mom is right. You just have to go through no matter what.
That's a great story. And so does your sister still listen to your speeches today, or do you run
We
ideas
work
by her?
together. We work together. I mean, I literally wouldn't be doing it without her. And what was kind of funny, Scott, is initially this was all about me. Like, I didn't care about anybody else.
Yep.
I was just in it to like dig myself out of the hole. I was like, you can't be in your early 30s in your parents' house, Sterling. Right? Like, either I'm going to end it or I'm going to do something about it. Right?
Yep.
And you know, my sister saw all the discomfort that I was going through, how hard it was for me to get on that stage. And she's like, you know what, I'm gonna take a little piece of this myself. And she, like too many young people, especially young women, dealt with body dysmorphia, eating disorders. And she says, Sterling, I will be healthy no matter what. And today she's a championship bodybuilder, believe it or not. It's insane.
Wow.
And then
And
her
she has the
friend,
3 kids. Does she have you're an uncle to 3, right? Or no?
I am an uncle to 3. That's my brother. I've got 2 brothers and a sister.
Okay.
And it's the brother that comes after me that has the couple of kids.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. So she's become this championship bodybuilder, which I look at her Instagram, I'm still like blown away by it. But then some of her friends, people I used to work with, like people were seeing my life, her life, others' lives transformed by discomfort. And they start getting in on this thing. And that's how the No Matter What community started. It wasn't like, oh, we want to build a community, right?
Yeah.
It was people come and say, Sterling, what did you do? Or Haviland, what did you do? And them starting to make big goals or little goals, it doesn't really matter to me. More importantly, they were willing to go through whatever the discomfort necessary to achieve them was. And we've had people start companies, start new careers, transform their families, double revenues, new health goals, personal goals, life goals, like all the things. And I'm like, this is not about you anymore. This is about supporting others to achieve however crazy or seemingly impossible their goals are. And somehow it still blows me away.
Yeah.
Many of them have achieved those things as
It's
well.
almost like your speech probably had so much authenticity in it. And sometimes the rawest version of ourselves are what people are so afraid to put out there into the world. And so when you
Yeah.
start there, man, it can amplify an audience so quickly because they're feeling it, they're thinking it. Plus,
Yeah.
remember, like 80+% of them are petrified to be where you are. So the first thing they're thinking, I've given presentations that I thought were the worst of my life.
Yeah.
And somebody comes up to me and said, that was the best I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And I'm laughing in my head. And I go, you must really hate public speaking. And they're like,
Yeah.
how did you know? You're right. And I said, because that wasn't the best. But
Yeah.
it was your raw authenticity and your ability to face that, you know, discomfort, like you said. How amazing is that? Now you're an adventurer as well, right? I mean, you
Right.
kind of, this is my ADD transition, but I just want to
Yeah.
cover 2 quick
A
things.
novice adventurer.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, the novice adventure, I checked out the Instagram page and you've
Yeah.
recently been into the Amazon in like this very uncomfortable situation. It is discomfort at every level. Can you
Yeah.
give the audience just a little bit of an idea what that experience was, maybe why you did it, and
Yeah.
then what was an impact you took away after you finished it?
Yeah. Well, early on, I found some research out of the University of Michigan. And, you know, we've all felt physical discomfort, like you stub a toe, or
Yeah.
emotional discomfort, like you broke up with somebody, lost a big deal. They were scanning, the university was scanning people's brains and bodies as they were going through these different kinds of discomfort, physical, mental, emotional. And they found that no matter what kind of discomfort it was, the brain and body process it almost identically. So much so, you can take acetaminophen and it will help you with emotional pain. It's not a biohack. I'm not a
Right.
doctor. I don't
I got you.
suggest that, right? But what I learned from that, what I took from that is, well, if where we meet discomfort is the same anywhere, we can grow our capacity to deal with it everywhere. It's a muscle you can build. If you want to build your biceps, you go to the gym. Well, if you want to build your breakthrough results, you want to build your resiliency, you want to be able to grow, you hunt discomfort no matter what form it's in. And so, again, I didn't come out of the womb an adventure. Like, I don't have some thrill-seeking gene in my body. Like, many of the things that I do scare me, but I know that the more I meet discomfort in any of one of the crazy things that I do, the better I'm going to be able to handle it in other situations. So I went to Peru. I found a group down there, an indigenous group called the Shipibo. And they have a kind of a rite of passage process that in their culture they put people through. And it was 2 weeks long. And so for 2 weeks, I'm in basically a jungle hut by myself. There's no talking. There's one meal a day at most with no salt or sugar or flavoring or seasoning or spices of any kind. Some days there's no meals. There's very little reading. It's about 100 degrees out, 100% humidity, bugs like you would imagine in the Amazon, and no liquids can touch your skin. So no sunscreens or lotions or bug spray or anything like that. And the thing that got me, like that rose to the top of that level of discomfort, if that wasn't enough, was the fact that there were some periods where there was no water. It's called dry fasting. So I went as
Oh,
long as 53 hours with no water or food. And I'll tell you, it broke me. I was like, forget no matter what, forget this whole thing. I got to get out of here. Because it felt very much like a survival instinct. Like, I'm going to die here. Now, the good people there were taking care of me. They were keeping an eye on me, right? It was discomfort, but they've assured me that it wasn't danger. And that's an important distinction
right.
to know,
Yep.
right? Just because you're uncomfortable doesn't mean it's dangerous. But everything in my head screamed, get out of here, quit, go home. I'm coming up with excuses in my head. Like, I've got this problem, I got that problem, I got this emergency, right? Which I think when we're confronted with extreme levels of discomfort, and I mean that relatively, whatever that is for you, we start to look for an escape plan.
Yeah.
And I'm watching myself do this, and I don't care, right? I'm like, just get me out of here. But what got me through it was what we've talked about here is, one, I committed. I told everybody up front, I told social media, I told my team, like, I'm going to do this no matter what. So I didn't move. I stayed in the hammock that I was in. And I had my street gang back home that wasn't there with me, but I could recall them and think about some of the things that they were saying to me. So I did get through the whole thing. And I think there were maybe two things that I took away. One is, this is going to sound simple, but look at it more from a deeper, more embodied perspective, which is, what is, right? The temperature was the temperature. Humidity was humidity. The bugs were what they were. I was where I was. I committed to what I was committed to. And I had all these emotions about it. I don't want to be here. I'm sad. I'm tired. I want to go home. I hate this thing. What are you doing? Why can't you just be normal, Sterling? Right? But no matter how much resentment, anger, sorrow I had about those things, did not change my circumstances. It goes back to that Carl Jung quote, right? Condemnation doesn't liberate, it oppresses. And I had this moment where I literally broke, like, all these emotions come pouring out of me. Mostly grief. Mostly I'm just crying there by myself in the Amazon because I couldn't have what I wanted. I couldn't be back where I wanted to be. I couldn't have that comfort and certainty, at least at that moment. And I kid you not, like, I've been teaching for years about that stuff. At that moment, I experienced it again and newly. I was like, wow. Like, once I let go of that discomfort, I let that grief and anger move through me, there was this peace and happiness to be right where I was. Now, I still didn't like it necessarily, but I accepted it. And
Yep.
that was key. And the second thing, just really briefly, I know I'm talking a lot,
No,
was
I love it.
um, dealing with some of the things that seem to me more dangerous, right? The longer fasting, dry fasting, not having water. Like I confronted not being here. I confronted death in a new way. And I've done a lot of exercises around it. I think about it a lot. I think about like how finite and how short my time is here. But looking at it, it felt like I was looking at it in the face. It started to reconnect me with those things that matter. Like, hey, I've been a little bit hard on this person on my team. Hey, I haven't said I love you to my mom. Like maybe I've said it, but I haven't like really meant it in a while. I'm going to tell her when I get back. And reconnecting with those things in the face of the finite future was, well, it's what we talked a little bit about already. Like I cannot be more grateful for it.
Yeah. We use the term high performer. Entrepreneurs tend to be that way, high energy, getting a lot done, more than most people, more than the average. In order to be exceptional, you have to be the exception is something that I always believe in.
Yeah.
Um, at the end of the day, I think that sometimes you have to actually do big things that are actually taking you out of that comfort zone. I mean,
Yeah.
I find that sometimes I have to actually focus on relaxation, like
Yeah.
separation, relaxation. The acceptance is something I can move forward and move through. But
Yeah.
what you're describing is you've removed yourself from all the security, from all the comfort, from your knowledge base of water intake, of bugs. Like, what if the wrong bug bites me? I mean, these are
Right.
all so disgustingly real.
Yeah.
And you are faced with that. And I think in those moments, they're almost like eulogy moments, right? They're
Exactly. That's a
if
great
I
way to
wasn't
say
here,
it.
what would it be?
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. Maybe a challenge for everybody. Now, a new challenge for myself is like, how many eulogy moments can you have in your life?
Yeah. That's
Right?
awesome.
Like, what are
Yeah.
those not just things that you're going to do, but the purpose, the why, the connection you discover while doing them. That I think would make not just for a great life, but for a meaningful life. And I have no doubt all the results you want that go along with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Eulogies are something that are sad, but it's also a celebration of life.
Yeah.
We lost a very close family friend this week who was only 26
Oh,
years old.
oh,
And my it was all my dad's buddies and all of their children were all there, and they all grew up in this
mm,
really close group. And I happened to be standing outside at the wake, and all of my dad's buddies are like in a line watching the changing of the guard
mm,
of the young man and the sheriff's deputies that are in there. And all the dads have just these welled up eyes and these uncomfortable feelings. And they're the strongest men I knew growing up. And
yeah.
you have to not only experience those moments, you have to also think while you're doing it. and
Yeah.
and while I was sitting there, I was just like, man, I'm so grateful that we have close people like this in our lives. I'm so thankful that a long life isn't always granted to people, but a full life can be. And this kid lived a full life, even if it was short. And
Mm,
when you're thinking of these eulogy moments, like, it's good to step back and just be reminded of the most important things. And to that point, I left. My dad and mom came over the other night, and we're at our fire pit having a bourbon. And my dad awkwardly comes up and he goes, can I just give you a hug? And
mm,
I'm like, Dad, what? Yeah, you always can hug me. I hug you all the time. He goes, no, the other night I didn't hug you when you left, and I couldn't get it out of my mind for the last 3 days. I'm watching someone's wake. All my best friends are standing next to me, and I didn't hug my son who's here. Like, I didn't pay attention. And so now I'm uncomfortable but completely, whatever, Dad, it's no problem. So my dad gives me this long hug, and I won't forget it. And I'm grateful that those experiences, when you experience them, I just think we have to do a better job as we grow, as we learn. And I don't know what it is about getting older. You start to actually think about stuff you probably could have been thinking about for the last 20, 30 years,
Yeah.
but you're not ready. Your grandmother's perspective, where we started in this conversation, you know, that moment, the driving, the joy it brings you today is 10 times the joy it was in the moment. But if we can actually be more present in those moments, that's where we find that really, really deep existence and acceptance. And I love what you're saying is something that I believe all the time, and that is you are where you're supposed to be, wherever that is. Even if you're in the Amazon, in a
Mhm.
hammock, without water, you are right where you're supposed to be, and it is what it is. So if we can do that, then we can move forward. And you have given so many great things. I hope people that are listening today are hashtagging no matter what. They're finding the no matter what people. They're reading Hunting Discomfort,
Right.
Sterling Hawkins, how to get breakthrough results in life and business no matter what. And they're learning from people around them earlier than maybe you and I did,
Yeah.
because this has been such a great conversation. I could honestly take it a lot longer, but I want to be very mindful of our time. And I
Yeah.
want you to tell the audience that's listening a little bit about how to find you, and maybe just what you're working on right now that might be something important they can follow, or anything that's important to you, to make sure that we can increase this audience, because what you're doing is awesome. And the more people that hunt discomfort are going to find actual more purpose in their lives. And that's what we know. And helping people is what you're all about. So tell them what's important now.
Totally. And more results as well. You know, the financial related, time related, business related, all of it. And Scott, thank you so much for today first. Like I really appreciate the time. Appreciate everybody that's kind of joined us for the podcast. It does really mean a lot to me. And for folks that want to kind of dive in and learn a little bit more about me and us and what we're up to, the best website for that is sterlinghawkins.com. And all my social media is there. I even just started a TikTok account, by the way, just to fully dive into discomfort myself. And one of the things that I would suggest you do, well, there's two things. One is you can look at some of the other things that the No Matter What community is doing. And I kid you not, it's inspiring. I go whenever I'm feeling a little bit down, to what we were talking about earlier, I go there to see like what people are up to. And I might even take the next step to say, how can I help them? Like, how can I help them achieve their goals? It's constantly inspiring. And you can even put in something that you're committed to no matter what as well. The second thing is there are 5 main discomforts that stop all of us, and we all deal with all of them, but there's one that rises to the top. Like right now, wherever you are, there is one discomfort that stands out that's in your way. There's a 15 question quiz. It doesn't cost anything. We're not selling anything. 15 question quiz that you can take that will give you, well, what is that discomfort? And maybe, well, just as important is what is my pathway to break through it, to do something about it. And if you've got any other questions, want to talk, drop me an email. Happy to talk to anybody, support however I can.
Well, and obviously you're still speaking, because Singapore
Yeah.
launched a great speaking career,
Yes.
and you've got to practice more in front of your sister to help her make you better. And
Always,
that's
always. Well, and now I get client feedback. Like I hunt it out, right? Like I'm on debrief calls and they're like, "Oh, great, greatest talk I ever saw, Sterling." Whatever it is, and I'm like, "Okay, well, tell me, like if you really had to say what could be better, what could be different, where did I lose people?" Right? You really got to hunt that stuff out. So,
Yeah. Well, you're hunting discomfort every day. You're
doing my
sharing your
best.
story. You're helping people. Ultimately, that purpose rises to the top, and people want to follow that, and they want to be a part of the No Matter What community. I'm really grateful you joined us today. Thank you so much for sharing the story, and I look forward to learning more from you in the future, man. What a great talk today. Thanks.
Thank you.